just want to apologize, and I'm sorry to everyone.
You gotta be kidding me! This is a joke!
I'm scared to close my eyes.
What the fuck is that?
I think it's a pretty fair statement to say that the Blair Witch Project came out at the right time and the right place. On the brink of technology becoming more and more accessible to the world, and people starting to understand the ease of it as well, people weren't yet aware of how to distinguish truth on the internet. And found footage existed before this movie. Cannibal Holocaust was released in 1980, and the earliest example of a film in this subgenre that I can find is a film called The Connection from 1961. I've got no idea what it's about, but what I do know is that neither of these films had any particular major success, whereas The Blair Witch Project is the found footage movie. On a budget of $3,500, it has made almost $200 million. One of the truly most effective and influential movies to date. Chances are, even if you've not seen the movie, which you've got to see it, you've seen it parodied or talked about in some way or referenced. When this released in 1999, it really did push people's beliefs of what was real and what wasn't. The film itself was so authentically crafted, but also the surrounding media added so much because that was something we'd not really seen before. Using the actors' real names instead of making characters, the website showing that they were missing, like with found items such as Heather's journal, and then obviously the tapes, which is what the film is made of. I mean, the parents of the actors got letters saying, "Hope you find your children" and stuff, because people genuinely believed it. Because everyone was stupid. That's a joke. The opening obviously gives us all the context we need as to why we're seeing what we're seeing. Because that's the big caveat with this subgenre. You need an excuse as to why the characters are filming things. And so often you're just thinking, why haven't they put the camera down? But that's why the opening card is perfect. We know that these have been found and strung together by the police, and our protagonists are film students. That is perfectly presented through the acting and the actual recording. The cast were the crew for this film, and it shows in the best way. I love how Heather comes off as almost a too self-serious college student. It reminds me of people I knew and myself when I was in college. I mean, Heather stumbles over words as she's doing a voiceover, Josh fails to properly focus the camera for an interview, and they just want to get drunk and smoke weed the night before they go on their trip into the woods. It's so amateur, and that's amazing, and there's so much improvisation for the film. Like I say, the cast were the crew. The characters were built on the actor's personality. That focusing mistake was genuinely the actor Josh, who had lied about his camera knowledge because he really wanted this role. I love the world building in Burkittsville, with this legend of the Blair Witch being something that the locals are all very aware of, but everyone has a wildly different response. They create a real sense of mystery and curiosity, whether there is something to this legend or, as the students seem to think, just a local myth. But what is for certain is that the idea has affected the town, and there has been cases of missing people and strange deaths that the locals tell us about.
And you think that it's possible that she's still up there now?
I don't go up there.
You don't go up there?
Yeah, I believe enough not to go up there.
The film alone can be seen as non-supernatural to a degree. When you include the wider franchise, that's not really possible. There's such the perfect amount of information dropped in this film to leave plenty up to interpretation and theorizing. It creates just some great base lore. It's left up to us about what to believe, but by the end we understand there's at least some truth to at least some of what the residents are saying, because what happens in the final moments resembles one of the stories that we get told. After these interviews, they get some rest, and by rest, I mean drink some whiskey that they're too young to appreciate. They're meant to be like my age, I swear. I don't know why I'm talking like that. But before we head into Black Hills Forest, I want to talk... I find the mythology of this series so intriguing because of the nature of the franchise. Even though the franchise, it's not gone on like others such as Paranormal Activity, where there's been like 7 or 8, there have been 2 sequels as well as a game. I've only seen Adam Wingard's 2016 Blair Witch. I've not seen the Book of Shadows one, which I believe takes place outside of the continuity anyway.
I thought the movie was cool.
And I've not actually finished the game, but I've played like half of it. But both advance the lore without giving any concrete explanations. They advance the lore without harming the original product in any way. I think the 2016 Blair Witch is at its best when it's doing that, when it is taking the concepts further. All its time-bendy shit is so cool, and the surprising body horror subplot that comes into play in that movie is really effective, as well as showing an actual creature that isn't enough to ruin any mystery and is still pretty scary. The 2016 movie expands the power of the witch and the mythology, and you truly feel the scale of her power much more in that movie. And then the game does even more with that. It's not really attached to the story of the films. It could quite easily not be a Blair Witch game, and it continues to play with time and your sense of reality, and that's the big thing. I think it's amazing how that original film blurred that line, and the mythology, which was there in the original, has evolved into something even bigger, where a part of the witch's identity and power seems to be manipulating reality itself. The 2016 sequel essentially is what says outright that there is crazy shit going on in these woods. You can't really argue with the events of that film, whereas you look at the original and you could think they could be human planned. But it does such a good job at making an intriguing backdrop for context about this story, this documentary that these characters are making. You want to know specifically what it's all about. There are tons of moments we could point to and think, that's where it went wrong. But also, maybe just as soon as they stepped into the woods, they were doomed, which is kind of the actual case. But, like I say, viewing this film as an isolated thing, you have different options of how you want to think. We don't know much definitively about the Blair Witch, and we know a bit about the events revolving her, but mostly how it's affected the town. It's also incredibly believable that this would be chosen for a college project. But anyway, going back to the original film, Heather, Mike and Josh start their hike into the woods, and it doesn't take long for Heather and Mike to clash. Tension is already there, especially as those two don't know each other. Josh is the middleman. He knew Mike, but Heather and Mike have only just met. And it's not long before they seemingly lose bearings of where they are. Heather is adamant she knows where they're going, and they carry on and find these piles of rocks, which I think are supposed to be the graves of the children spoke about by that one guy earlier. So Josh knocking them over probably wasn't the best idea, mate. And it's that night they hear twigs snapping and general spooky things going on deep into the woods. Heather wants to investigate, but Mike refuses, as he, at least at this point, has good survival instincts. But Mike does say that he can't hear anything, but immediately contradicting himself the following morning, rationalizing what he had heard. Frustration grows as they travel further and seemingly get more lost, but the two guys pinning it on Heather as she's the one with the map, and still refusing to admit that they could be lost. More spooky happenings happen throughout that night, and weirder too, with it not coming from any specific direction. It's just crazy surround sound. As they continue on, they realise they don't have the map. This causes Josh to really start losing his shit, blaming Heather as apparently she was the last one with it, which she doesn't think. And this is where I have my only real problem with the film. I think there probably is a little bit too much time dedicated to just walking in the woods and arguing over the lost map. I think this bit in particular could have been cut down a little bit, but it's really not a big deal for me. But anyway, without the map, they decide, okay, we're just going to walk in a straight line because, well, it's America. They'll reach the end of the woods eventually. But again, tensions continue to rise as Heather also continues to film everything that the others aren't too big on. They just want to get out at this point. It's after this that Mike admits he threw away the map. He booted it into the creek, which obviously infuriates the other two, who absolutely gun for Mike. So loudly that Heather is destroying the microphone.
You are a fucking asshole!
This then makes you insanely doubt Mike for the entire movie. As someone who Heather didn't know, has he been fucking with them the whole time? You really don't feel like you can trust him. And it pushes everyone into total breakdown status, seemingly in the middle of an endless forest with salvation nowhere in sight, and now things start to get proper strange. Heather finds countless stick figures strung up across loads of trees, which is some frankly haunting imagery. I've got goosebumps talking about this movie. It is one of the scariest movies ever made. But anyway, these stick figures are simply designed that the directors actually didn't like at first, but thankfully they were brought round because it's now the symbol of the series. It's iconic. And all of these shots in this little section of the woods are truly threatening and intimidating. This is a key changing point in the movie, almost concrete evidence that there's something else in this woods that isn't just people fucking with them, which has kind of been the assumption for most of the time they've been out there, that someone's just followed them and been able to fuck with them. but after they took methods to make sure they didn't happen, like they didn't light fires so no one could see the smoke and stuff, and it continued to happen. The more and more we go on, the more the Blair Witch seems to be a reality. It escalates really badly, and they can hear children crying outside, and then having a load of hands like pushing up against the tent, to the point they just sprint out into the darkness. Heather's screaming reaction to seeing something as they're running is terrifying to me, and seared into my brain from that first watch I had of this film.
Oh my god, what the fuck is that? What the fuck is that?
It sells it so well. We don't need to see whatever it was. It's actually terrifying. They hold out in the open, too scared to return to their tents, but struggling to acknowledge that this stuff might not be totally natural. When they return after the sun rises, they see Josh has had some kind of slime thrown over all of his stuff, but it's just his stuff. Solely his materials have been fucked with, clearly signifying what is going to happen over the next few days. It's unclear now, but I think later it's clear that he has been the first chosen. But here, they start to finally accept that something weird is going on, and that frankly, this situation is fucked. Despite following one direction without change, they find themselves at the same tree to cross a creek as they came across earlier, which is obviously impossible. Heather hits a breaking point, and it's a truly scary and anxiety-inducing moment. Really emotional as well. I can't reiterate how incredible the acting was, because they were just living through it basically. After this, and with no progress made, sanity is almost gone altogether. They're all trying really hard to keep it together, but that is an impossible task at this point. A big point of tension has been how Heather has been continuously filming. Despite the terrifying experiences they've had, a scene that acts as an interrogation from Josh finally breaks Heather.
There's a fucking witch and she keeps leaving shit outside your door. We ended up in the same place. There's no one here to help you. That's your motivation.
She says it's all she's got left, and it's a truly heartbreaking moment. These actors truly lived these events, and that's how the realism was achieved so well. They were given directions through walkie-talkies when necessary, and they were left like supply packages in the morning, and it was the entire crew that was pulling the shit but wouldn't tell them what was going to happen. That moment Heather sees something, I think it was actually one of the crew members running with like boxes on their heads, but generally they were just left to survive. There was only one instance where they had to intervene, which is a little bit later when Heather finds the pile of sticks, because she initially refused to open them, but the director said, nah, gotta open that. But they all did what they could to make the experience as safe as possible, because this would be incredibly mentally taxing having to stay in character the entire time. So they came up with a safe word, which was taco, in case everything got too much, especially with the amount of time dedicated to Heather getting yelled at. As much as the blurred reality as a viewer is a great aspect of the terrifying experience, it was the same for the actors, but obviously in their position, the blurred reality could easily lead to issues, but I don't think it ever did. Josh continues using the camera and claims now he understands why Heather likes it so much, saying that it's not quite reality. And their final conversation is, as a trio, is really tragic, apologizing to each other and just talking about food that they love. They want cheeseburgers, they want mashed potatoes. But then we cut to the morning with Heather screaming Josh's name, and we instantly can gather the bad news. That night, they hear yelling in the distance and realize that it's Josh, screaming in agony, and another truly terrifying moment to me, sounding as if he's being gagged and just being put through absolute torture. His screams just feel so real and so visceral, not knowing a specific direction again either.
Josh?
Pure nightmare fuel. And then the following morning, Heather finds this pile of twigs wrapped in Josh's flannel shirt. I've always struggled to tell what's actually in this thing, but it appears to be some hair, maybe some teeth, maybe a bit of a tongue, all soaked in blood. This pushes Heather, obviously, even further, choosing not to tell Mike, but just entering a state of denial and pure fear, because this seemingly confirms Josh's fate. As much as this scene of Heather's apology has been parodied, it's a legitimately great moment because it brings Heather's arc full circle. After so much denial and stubbornness in her direction and self-confidence, she finally admits that she was wrong at times. It's an accepting moment for her. When they hear the screams of Josh again sometime later, they try to follow them, but finding a house randomly in the middle of these endless woods. Again, kind of impossible. Seemingly abandoned and falling to bits, it's a terrifyingly designed building. The children's handprints on the wall, and then the yells of Josh seemingly coming from upstairs, but after getting upstairs, they're coming from downstairs. Again, just nothing makes physical sense. With Mike leading the charge as well, with Heather falling slowly behind, this creates so much good anxiety. The black and white shots in the house are so much scarier to me as well. But having Mike run into the unknown and Heather being behind and slower makes us fear for Mike and what he's running into. And especially when we stop hearing from Mike, we're scared about what Heather's going to catch up and see. And when we do catch up, what we do see is genuinely one of the scariest moments in cinema history to me. Seeing Mike stood facing the corner and the screams of Heather right before the camera is dropped.
No.
Man, what an incredible ending. This is, in my opinion, one of the scariest movies of all time. It was one of the earliest horrors I watched and really created and really founded my love for found footage. I think it's truly lightning in a bottle because I don't think you can ever create such a realistic feel ever again. Even not having watched it when it released, I can still get so immersed and believe everything. There's an awful sense of dread from the get-go because we just know that these characters are doomed. And again, I can't reiterate how important it is how the film feels. The dogshit camera quality, the mic blowing out, the complete lack of anything cinematic. Even when we're seeing like B-roll that they filmed for their documentary, doesn't feel cinematic because they're amateurs. It just adds a whole new layer. And the horror is just genuinely well crafted on a story level. The vague idea of a witch in these woods that maybe or maybe isn't true, and to a degree a feeling that maybe it's not supernatural. Is there a person causing all of this chaos? Like I say, I think it's only really confirmed that it is supernatural after this, after the movie. But the imagery in this film alone is just so effective and scary and believably real. And I think all the wider lore that came after it is pretty welcome additions. Particularly 2016, as much as it's not great, I love the additions it had to this original.